Hi, it is Kat from My Happy Insides, and today I want to share with you about the Enneagram's 3 centers of intelligence and why we need all 3. And I know that if you're new to the Enneagram, that you might think, I just want to know about my type. I don't need to know about these centers. But actually, when you understand the centers, you understand yourself better, and it gives you some tricks to really be a better version of yourself. And I'll explain. Now, most of us, when we are getting to know the Enneagram, maybe we get familiar with seeing it. So if we look at the Enneagram symbol itself, there are 9 different types that go around the circle, and then you see some lines that are connecting all of these numbers. But often what's not represented is the fact that all 9 types are divided into triads. There are actually 3 different centers, and these are centers of intelligence. Now, when I say that, it's because we have different ways of knowing things. For example, one way we know something is through our body. We have an instinct, this gut. Sometimes our gut is giving us a message, and it is a way of knowing something. Now, the next one is through our heart. It's our feeling center. It's these emotions that we have. They're sending us information about what's going on. Often, we're having an emotion before we even register what's happening around us. Before we can even form a thought, we're having a feeling about it. And then finally, the third center is this thinking center. It's our head center, which is where we typically think that we come to know things or understand things. But actually, it's all 3. Our gut can tell us something, our instinct, our heart, and our head. And ideally, we want to have all 3. But as you learn about the Enneagram, you'll start to understand that your interaction with these different centers actually contributes to your personality. And your personality makes more sense when you understand your relationship with each of these 3 centers. So let's think about this. If we have all 3 centers, the instinct or body, the feeling or heart, and the thinking or the head, what happens if we pull one of those out? One of these goes offline, let's say. Well, what happens if we start by pulling out the body? The body is now offline. So now we're left with our emotions and our thoughts. Think of a time in your life where you were just fully in your emotions and your thoughts, and your body was kind of disconnected from the whole thing. Maybe you were fantasizing. Maybe you were ruminating or stewing over something. Maybe you were daydreaming. When we think about just having our head and our heart, oftentimes we are spending a lot of time kind of withdrawn into ourselves, whether we are thinking about the past or maybe we're anticipating the future. But either way, we're not actually necessarily doing much. We just tend to be withdrawn into ourselves, and we're spending a lot of time just these thoughts and these emotions can actually reinforce each other in a circular way. Think about if you've ever experienced a breakup. This is often where we feel like the body's offline, and really we are just in it with our heart and our head, and they are just circling around. Now, let's take a look at what happens if we get rid of the heart center. What happens if you just sign off online and you're no longer connected to your emotions or your feeling? Well, now your body's online, your head's online. And so what actually can happen is you can be like this thinking, doing machine. Maybe you are incredibly productive, you've got ideas, and then you're acting them out, and you're just going. And so you're taking a lot of action, and you're having a lot of thoughts. But if your heart's not in it, you might actually be missing some meaning in what you're doing. You could literally be going through the motions without actually feeling connected to anything that you're actually doing. And sometimes we can get caught down this rabbit hole of taking action on something and then realizing later, you know what, this doesn't have meaning to me. I'm not actually feeling connected to it. And that can happen if our feeling center is offline. And then we take a look, what happens if we pull out the heart or the head center? Now we're left with this instinct and we've got our emotions, but we're not really necessarily thinking clearly or tapping into our head. Well, a great example of this would be if you have this emotional charge and then your gut is telling you you have to do something or take action, but your head's not there. So let's say you're scrolling through social media and you see a headline that angers you. And let's be honest, there are a lot of them. And they're designed that way. They want to trigger your emotions. That happens before you can even think about it. So your gut says, this is wrong. Your emotions say, this is wrong. And before you know it, you could get sucked into the comment section. Maybe you're exclaiming something out loud. Your head's not online, so you're not necessarily thinking clearly. Instead, it's just this emotional charge. Now, it's not always negative. This can happen on the positive side as well. But when we're not thinking clearly, we're really not being our best. So why do I talk about this? Well, ultimately, we want all three centers to be accessible. We want them all to be online. And we want to acknowledge which is the one that we tend to neglect. Now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, yeah, I think I know which one I neglect the most, I want you to tell me. So say in the comments, which one of these centers do you tend to neglect the most? Which one is sort of your last ditch? Because you probably recognize yourself in a couple. For example, I'm a type 7. I spend a lot of time in my head, anticipating, thinking of what I want to do next, generating ideas, sometimes almost so fast, I can't even really process them all. And then my instinct comes on where I just want to take action and act out as many ideas as possible. So even though I'm a pretty happy person and I've got emotions, I often am actually neglecting my heart center. I have a tendency to not want to get into the feelings because, well, what if they're not positive? I would much rather just think and take action. So that's an example of how when I understand my neglected center, the one that I tend to leave behind, I can actually see how my 7 personality makes a lot of sense. I can be quite scattered. I can start projects before I finish another project. And I can feel like I just need to do the next thing. And I'm always wondering what's around the corner. And I'm always anticipating the next thing. Now that's a 7 when they're not at their best. And you're not at your best when you're kind of going through the motions and when you're asleep. So this is when you are sort of average of your type. And that's not what we want. And ultimately, I'm sharing this because the Enneagram is a tool for transformation. It is something we can use to catch ourselves in the act, to be able to notice when I'm turning into a thinking, doing machine and my heart's not in it, or I'm not connected to my purpose. When I can spot that more easily, I can say, okay, how do I bring all 3 centers online? And the beauty is that you always have access to all 3 of them by getting still in your body, by asking yourself how you feel in your heart, and then by checking in with your thoughts, you can actually access all of them. But you can only do that when you're present. And this comes back over and over with the Enneagram, is that it's all about presence. When you have all 3 centers, you are present. You're in the here and the now. And that's where we start to become our best. Not when we're stuck in the past or we're thinking about the future, but when we are fully present, then we can turn into the best version of ourselves. We can be awake to our personality. Now, if you are newer to the Enneagram and you want to learn some of these things, or maybe you just want to get an overview, I am hosting a training for beginners. So it's called Enneagram for Beginners. And the next one is coming up on Wednesday, August the 19th. It is completely free. It's 45 minutes, and it's just a great way to dip your toes into the Enneagram and start to understand it. Why is this personality system one that people keep talking about? So I would love if you can join me. And if you are watching this after the 19th, check back anyway with the link because I'm always updating new dates as I go along. I hope that this information about the 3 centers has given you a little bit of insight and maybe gets you to think, which one do I tend to neglect? And if you know, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. But no matter what, we want to strive to be present. And remember, you can access all 3 centers of intelligence whenever you want. You just have to notice and then you have to do it.